A very warm welcome to this panel on the really exciting archaeological discoveries made in Saudi Arabia in recent years. I'd like to thank the King Faisal Center for Research in Islamic Studies for offering us the opportunity to be a partner in this event. I'm a great admirer of the work of the center and had the pleasure of working closely with its Secretary General, Dr. Saud Sarhan, on several projects. My organization, the International Association for the Study of Arabia, IASA, promotes research relating to the Arabian Peninsula in a wide range of disciplines by awarding research grants, disseminating news of research, and organizing panels and lectures like this one. In fact, our next event on 21 January, trustees, Michael MacDonald, on tweets from ancient Arabia. These are reference to the tens of thousands of brief messages carved on rock by nomads 2,000 years ago, which really resemble today's tweets in giving us a detailed picture of their lives, their relations with each other, and above all, what they felt. But our main event is the annual seminar for Arabian Studies, which is a major international forum for the presentation of the latest academic research on the Arabian Peninsula. Between 50 and 60 papers are presented each year, with over 200 scholars and students from countries throughout the world attending. The next seminar will be in July 2021, will be held at Casa Arab in Cordoba in Spain. Full details of this and everything else about us are at our website, www.theiasa.com. I think we're in a really excellent evening. It's a great team of speakers. The event will be moderated by Derek Kennett, a former chair of the IASA from the University of Durham. Dr. Kennett has been undertaking archaeological fieldwork and research in Arabia since about 1992. He's particularly interested in the development of settlement in Eastern Arabia. He will now introduce the speakers.
Hello, Noel. Thank you, Noel, very much. And yes, it's a fantastic event, and I'm very honored to be here. I've been asked to moderate. We've got three fantastic speakers, and it's a great time to be holding such an event. There has been so much exciting work done in Saudi Arabia over the last period. Lots of really interesting discoveries, a whole fresh approach, and we're lucky, we're really fortunate to have three key players in that. The first, I don't think I need to introduce them in detail. Their biodata has been sent round on the announcement for this event. But I'd like to say welcome to Dr. Jasir bin Salman Al-Harbash, who is the director, the CEO of the Heritage Commission, and a man with an enormous experience of Saudi cultural and heritage preservation. And he's going to say a few words of introduction before we move on to, I think we can say, one of the foremost archaeologists in Saudi Arabia, my old friend, Dr. Abdullah Al-Sharikh, who's here and who's going to speak to us about some of the work that he's been doing, a prominent figure in Saudi archaeology with some really interesting discoveries over the past few years. I think we don't know exactly, but it's going to be 20 or 30 minutes that we're going to hear from Abdullah. And then we move on to Professor Michael Petraglia, who is was the brains behind the formation of the Green Arabia project. That was a close collaboration between him and Abdullah Al-Sharikh, and has produced some really incredible, fantastic results and insights into the way that human occupation developed from the earliest times in Saudi Arabia and in the Arabian Peninsula more generally. So frankly, we're in for a fantastic evening. I think I'm really looking forward to hearing what everybody's got to say. No point in listening to me continue any further. I'd like to hand over to Dr. Jasir, and let's listen to what he has to say. Thank you very much, Dr. Jasir.
شكرا جزيلا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Thank you, Professor Noel, Professor Derek, and welcome my colleague, Dr. Abdullah, Dr. Michael. And really, I'm happy to be part of this, and thanking the King Faisal Center for Research and Islamic Studies and IASA, all people who are for maybe more than 2 months started preparing this amazing night, inshallah, to share the knowledge and latest from Saudi Arabia. And I want to spend very few moments, because I want to save the time for my colleagues, just to give you a very important updated information about the archaeology sector in specific and cultural sector in Saudi Arabia in general. And maybe it is a good constant that in 1964, the time of the late King Faisal, there was a decree to create archaeology unit and to be attached to the Ministry of Education at that time. From that period, 1964 until today, there was a huge progress in dealing with archaeology, moving from the Ministry of Education, then the Tourism Commission, Tourism Ministry. Then we were lucky in Saudi Arabia to have Ministry of Culture created less than 2 years ago. And then in this year, February 2020, the government of Saudi Arabia created 11 culture commissions. One of them, and the largest one, is the Heritage Commission. And I'm honored to be part of it. And we are now starting a new era, a new phase of continuing the great work done by different organizations, ministries, people, scholars for the last 50 years to discover and to work in Saudi archaeology. And I was lucky in the last 6-8 months to work and to have the details of Green Arabia project, this great project, and to have the honor to announce that amazing discovery a few months ago. And the thing that we are emphasizing on the new Heritage Commission, created a new Heritage Commission, and this is exactly match the goal and objectives of King Faisal Center and YASA, is we are open for international cooperation. We are not closed to do our work by ourselves. We believe our success will be part of international success. And this is the reason that we have now more than 20 international missions from almost 8 to 9 international countries, well known in archaeology and research. And this is the reason that we are willing to sign with the new missions. And this is the reason that also we are exploring different areas of archaeology. And maybe most of you have the news 2 weeks ago when His Highness Minister of Culture announced on the meeting that was before the G20 meeting, the Minister of Culture meeting for the G20 countries. He announced the creation of the Underwater Heritage Center. It is a new international center where we are responsible to create it, and we will create it with a cooperation with local and international players in this field. At the end of my brief, I want to repeat my thanks to the organizers, to the scholars who are attending, and to everyone who is listening. And we are open, and we have all communication tools through our social media account or different communication tools to receive suggestions, to receive ideas, to receive cooperation proposals, to discover the untapped Saudi archaeology sector that we think still have much more to be discovered and to be announced, inshallah. Thank you very much, and let's listen from the scholars. Thank you.
Dr. Jasir, thank you very much for that. And it's so encouraging to hear that fresh new energy is coming to the archaeological investigation of Saudi Arabia. And I'm sure that everything you said there is a very positive message, and I'm sure that it will result in fantastic work and fantastic discoveries. It's fantastic to hear that. Thank you very much. So now we move on to Dr. Abdullah Al-Sharikh, who I think, as everybody, is an associate professor at the Department of Archaeology at King Saud University. He's also an advisor to the Ministry of Tourism. And as I've mentioned, a prominent Saudi archaeologist, an academic. He's the instigator of numerous research projects. He was a key collaborator and part of the Green Arabia project, but also running the Red Sea project, the Camel Site project, the Dispersion Surface project with the University of York. He's doing a lot of really good work. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what he's got to say to us today. Abdullah, over to you, please.
Thank you, Derek, and I appreciate the kind words you have mentioned, and I do appreciate the organization of the King Faisal for Research and Islamic Studies of this webinar tonight, and I will share the screen and start with you. got the presentation? Derek?
Yes, Abdullah, we can see it very well. I can see it.
Okay,
certainly.
that's all I wanted to just to check. Okay, this presentation is going to focus on the archaeological research undertaken by Professor Jeff Bailey and myself, and a team of researchers and academics and research students from various research centers and universities around the world. And we have been working there from around 2004 to 2016, and continued with another project, the Surface Project, further up north from the southwest part of Saudi Arabia. All appreciation to all the organizations, government departments, institutions, individuals who have participated, supported, and encouraged, and provided us with a lot of logistical and other supports to make this project work. I am here presenting this project on behalf of my colleagues, especially Professor Jeff Bailey, Robin Inglis, Anthony. The focus of the project is based on two components. The first one is about the coastlines along the Eastern Red Sea and the evidence for sea level change and how that level change corresponds with the rest of the world and the continental shift, low sea level around the world. The second component focuses on the Paleolithic record along the coastline in southwest Saudi Arabia and up north to the Aqaba Strait. Of course, the location of the Arabian Peninsula is very critical and very important in the study of prehistoric human populations, movement, and dispersal around the world. And in addition to that, there are a number of issues that need to be taken into consideration in terms of the movement routes that human populations have taken. And the other thing is really regarding the effect of climate change, sea level change on the movement of human population and dispersal out of Africa and into a number of regions around the world, especially the Arabian Peninsula being the first land outside of Africa that any human population has to cross in order to move to other parts of the world. Of course, the effect of changes of sea level have considerably affected the geographical barriers and openings in front of human populations moving around. And with the rise and low of sea level, that affects many regions, and some regions become submerged, other regions becomes more revealed to human populations moving in the region. So if we see the two maps in front of us at 130,000 years ago, we can see that most of the Red Sea and the Arabian Gulf have been fully with high sea level and rise of water. At around 21,000 years in the lower map, we can notice that many parts of the Red Sea and the Arabian Gulf have almost disappeared. And that may have helped human populations to cross these parts and move around in the region outside of Africa. There are, of course, the typical two routes outside of Africa, the northern route through the Sinai Peninsula, and also the southern route, which we will explore further through the Bab el-Mandab in the southern Red Sea. Of course, the fluctuations in sea level have affected many parts of the world, and this is related to the melting of the ice caps, and that have actually shown us that the human heritage through time has been linked to coastal regions as much as to inland regions of the world. And coastal regions are very important in providing certain economic resources that human populations can benefit from in the first place, and also preserve some of the evidence that human populations have left through time due to the submergence of some of the regions of the world where water sea level have risen. In the meantime, we can see the Red Sea area in the middle of the slide here, and we can see a lot of areas in the Indian subcontinent, Asia, the Arabian Sea, Africa also have been affected by the same situation. Over here we can find that there are lots of archaeological sites found along the eastern Red Sea coast, and these are indications of the presence of human populations of the sea resources or the coastal resources as much as the inland resources. The effect of salinity and its percentage on the accumulation of salt domes in the sea and their possible effect in making the Red Sea a closed basin is highlighted by the Seidel 2003 and Rowling 2009 papers. The paper by Lambeck et al. 2011 have shown through mathematical modeling that there may not have been a total closure of the Red Sea, and there may have been a certain running of the Red Sea water, as will be shown in the following slide. However, there may have been opportunities for sea crossing across distances of about 4 kilometers of water, which would have been tough for human populations in prehistoric times, but still it's an opportunity that may have been tried from the southern end of the Red Sea. The archaeological survey from 2004 until 2016 have managed to record over 3,000 shell mounds in the Khorasan Islands alone, and that's really a huge number of archaeological remains in one region, and that's to a large extent due to the preservation of the area and the limited development in the area due to it being an island in the middle of the Red Sea. These shell mounds are dated from about 4,700 years to 6,500 years old. As many as 20 sites have been excavated in the Khorasan Islands, and there are evidence for seafaring, fishing with nets, and shell gathering and using of this material in human daily life. Also, there were some animal bones found in the area. We can see from the red dots in the top map the amount and the concentration of the shell mounds along the areas that may have been an extent for the seawater inland into the middle part of the Khorasan al-Kabir Island, the biggest island in the Khorasan Island. You can see from the trenches that have been taken, which have been a tough exercise due to the compact nature of the sediments in that area. However, some dates where we were able to get from these shell middens. Of course, the biggest challenge was really to do an underwater research program and explore through diving and other methods and understand the landscape, the submerged landscape of the Khorasan Islands and the Red Sea coastlines. And that necessitated that we try to collaborate with some of the big players in the region, especially Saudi Aramco, who was supportive of our cause and have provided us with the Midian ship you can see here on the right. And that's our colleagues, Professor Jeff Bailey and Professor Nick Fleming, and myself meeting with the Aramco team from the Marine Department. As you can see here in the lower bottom, right bottom photo, we can see the effect of the water on the coastline, as seen by land evidence. But we are trying to look for something similar that has been submerged, which will tell us about former coastlines for the in the area. By using Trimax gas mix at the time, it was possible for the diving team led by Dr. Gary Mumber to spend more time underwater and explore the area and map any features that may have been evidence of human presence in the underwater. Of course, to do more elaborate and more sophisticated work underwater, one needs really to use a lot of technologies to be able to do that, like multi-beam bathymetry, sub-bottom profiler, side scan sonar, seismic air gun for deep profiles, and also coring and getting collection of sediments for more analysis and so on. That brought us to the AJO ship survey of the Red Sea, which was the second effort of the team to really explore further, especially the AJO from the Hellenic Center for Marine Research was more equipped and more sufficient for the underwater work more than the Median ship, which was more of a base for our research. Here we can see on the bottom right photo, the team members, Jeff, Dimitri, and others working, some people from also from Archaeological survey. This is some of the techniques are used underwater, having the submarine and having some of the side sonar to be able to recognize underwater features. Myself and Jeff Bailey as well. This is some of the mapping, the underwater mapping for the base of the Red Sea on the continental shelf. And it was very interesting to see some of the features there. Some of it may have been evidence for a lake, and also probably evidence for some wadis, ancient wadis in the area. That is one of the possibilities that the team was exploring. Also the evidence of the bottom of the sea here from the side sonar imagery that will tell us about the variation in the topography of the base of the sea. The results achieved by these underwater operations will also hopefully be supported in the near future by the newly established center by the Ministry of Culture, which Dr. Jasser already mentioned, which focuses on the preservation of the submerged cultural heritage of, as was announced by His Highness the Minister of Culture, which is a good boost to any underwater research and study of submerged landscapes. With that, we move to the other part of this talk, which relates to the coastal regions Paleolithic record in southwest Saudi Arabia, and from the evidence that have been collected through the comprehensive archaeological survey program by the Department of Antiquities during the time of Dr. Abdullah Masri when he was the head of the department, and many archaeologists from international universities and academic centers have participated in that, and many archaeological and especially Paleolithic sites have been recorded from the 70s, and the evidence was very overwhelming and indicative, though it was basic, and the abilities of the teams at the time were limited due to many constraints geographical, environmental, and technical, etc. But there was a lot of evidence that shows the presence of lower Paleolithic sites, the closeness of these sites to the coastal regions, and the connection and the relationship with the topography of the area, be it volcanic or otherwise. From 2012 to 2017, many sites were registered and thousands of artifacts were collected by the team, in addition to samples for dating and environmental studies of the area. Here we see more sites have been recorded, and the purple regions are the volcanic regions in the area. And we can see that there is a correlation between the volcanic regions and the archaeological sites in the yellow dots. This is a more close-up of some of the areas, and here we can see the Al-Birk, which is very important. We'll be talking about in more detail in a while. This is also the other area, which is near the Abu Arish, just close to Jazan itself, with many sites, especially the early from lower Paleolithic, middle Paleolithic, and late Paleolithic sites were found all around the Jazan area in various topographic forms. In situ material were also found in sediments underneath lava flows. And that is very important because the presence of such material is evident that lava flows may have happened in the region, but human populations and evidence of the presence of hominins in the region were much earlier than some of the lava flows, which date to different time periods. Harrat al-Birk is a very important area that the team have worked on and studied, and many archaeological sites have been found, and due to that, more detailed research was also done in the area. There were raised coral terraces, beach deposits, high sea level was recorded, evidence of tectonic uplifts. All that is associated with the archaeological record and the material, the prehistoric material that were found there. Wadi Daban is one of the localities that was focused on by the team. And there it's located south of Al-Birk. And stone artifacts were actually found in deposits, which may indicate extensive human presence in coastal regions, in addition to the evidence already found before. Also, an 8-meter coral terrace was also found and dated around 130,000 years old. Wadi Dabsa is a very unique region that the team have done a lot of detailed work on. And it was shown that volcanism may have been very overwhelming, very overwhelming in the area, and it was a very active agent in the region that lasted, over a long period of time, from as early as 2.5 million years old up to 200,000 years old, and within that time span, human populations or evidence of archaeological material have been also found in the area. As can be seen, extensive presence of and scatters of archaeological artifacts were also found in various parts, but also especially associated with the Tofa within the volcanic regions in the Dabsa area. And this is one of the richest sites that was found by the team in the area, and the amount of material collected is surmount any other sites that were found in the region. Of course, understanding and the land formations in the area is key to really recognizing the localities where archaeological material can be found and studied in more detail. The artifacts collected in Wadi Dabsa reflect also social behavior and technological variabilities. Middle Paleolithic core technology was found and produces flat flakes and points that requires a lot of good understanding of the material and planning to make them. Here we can see the deep history of the material through technotypological studies. There are evidence for lower Paleolithic material in the presence of bifaces, as you can see here, and also Middle Paleolithic technology, prepared cores and so on, which we saw from the previous slide. That is evidence from about 500,000 to around 50,000 years old, which shows all stages of reduction, cores and waste flakes, and all of that is assumed to be of local origin. It's clear that human populations were present prior and post some volcanic activities in the Jazan region and north of it. An early date in Wadi Jazan reflects the presence of favorable conditions and ample coastal and land resources. Of course, there are a lot of things that future research has to deal with in terms of issues relating to the chronology and the association of archaeological material with set dates, and also the understanding of the environmental effects and the correlation between the coastal areas and the travel routes to various parts inland or along the coastal trail. We can see that archaeology is very much related to the geomorphological features found in the landscape, and the dynamic situation between the archaeology and the various geological effects that take place in terms of volcanism, uplifting, and land variation, land formation, and so on, all key to our understanding of the prehistory of the region. I end my talk by thanking the organizers for allowing us and giving us the opportunity to present about our work and our research. And I believe that most of what I have presented is glimpses of what have actually been undertaken, but due to time constraint and so on, I shall end my talk right now. I thank everybody for listening, and thank you.
Abdullah, thank you very much indeed for that. And both of those projects that we've heard of, but it's very nice to see some clearer evidence and a more detailed insight into what you're doing. And so many questions that come into one's head about that. I hope you don't mind, but I think that the best way is to listen to Mike, let him speak, and then at the end we'll have a good session on questions. I'm sure many people are going to want to come back to you with questions. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you very much for a very interesting talk, Abdullah. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
We're going to now move on to Professor Michael Petraglia, who's a professor of human evolution and prehistory at the Max Planck Institute for the Science of Human History in Jena in Germany. He's a very prestigious academic with honorary professorships in Queensland and associates at the Smithsonian. So he's a figure of international significance, and he's spent a lot of time recently working in Saudi. And the work he's organized has produced some really significant results. And I hope he's going to tell us about some of those today, some of the more exciting ones, as well as some of the more detailed ones. Mike, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Derek. I really thank our Saudi and British hosts for putting on this wonderful evening. And I really appreciate the invitation. I'm always excited and enthusiastic to talk about Saudi Arabia And I will now share my screen, and I will give you an overview and just the highlights of what we call the Green Arabia project, which has been happening for about 10 years now, very consistently, except for the times of COVID, unfortunately. We had 1 to 2 field seasons every year, and the findings have been extraordinary. We've been working hand in hand, of course, with the Saudis, together with an international crew. And I absolutely love talking about this project, and I love working in Saudi Arabia, so I hope you'll hear some of my enthusiasm come across. There were 3 reasons why I was very interested in researching in Saudi Arabia and the Arabian Peninsula in general. And the first one, of course, is that it is, in a sense, the center of the old world. It's a land bridge that connects Africa to the rest of Eurasia. And so it's a very essential landmass to study if you're interested in interconnections between regions, whatever they be. And in this case, we're of course interested in humans and human prehistory. And so Arabia is extremely important. It's been a missing part of the story, I have to say. Makes it very exciting though, because there's many gaps in the record that we can fill. But if you're interested in human migrations, for example, as you see on this panel on the right, you must study Arabia. And when you're talking about big sort of key questions in human evolution, like the timing of many out of Africa events, how can you possibly ignore the Arabian Peninsula? You can't. It's an essential part of the story of human evolution. And so I was very interested in looking at Arabia as the bridge between Africa and the rest of Eurasia. The second reason why I was really interested in coming to Arabia, working in Saudi Arabia, is that we know there have been dramatic climatic fluctuations through time, almost through eternity, if you will, for probably millions of years. And we are documenting hundreds of thousands of years of climatic fluctuation. In a sense, climate change is nothing new today. There's been a lot of climate change. And there's been a cycle, repeated cycle of wetting and drying of the landscapes of Saudi Arabia. And the wet part is the green part that we call Green Arabia. And as you'll see throughout my presentation, Green Arabia, when it is wet, when there's a lot of rainfall and environments really turn on, you see a transformation in terms of human migrations, animal migrations, the way that societies function. But also this wetting and drying also has impacts on human societies that developed within the last 10,000 years, for example. And people are very clever. There's all sorts of innovations that happen in Saudi Arabia to deal with climate change in the past. I mean, we're not the only ones in the world today that are interested in climate change and how it may impact our societies. Clearly, people living in Saudi Arabia in the past had to grapple with these issues. And I think that this can tell us a lot about the contemporary world and even the future world by looking at the past. And the third main reason why, as an archaeologist, I really wanted to work in Arabia is that even though there were a lot of archaeological sites that were known and found, many of them were just surface sites. They had no context, no environmental context. They didn't have dating. And we didn't know what kind of human ancestors might have been present there. When our own species, Homo sapiens, when did it get to Arabia? How long was our species there? And when we look at the long record going back in time not only was Homo sapiens probably present in Arabia, which we think they are now based on our evidence, but there were other ancestors that were probably in Saudi Arabia. We don't know for sure. We don't have their fossils, but we certainly have their archaeological sites. And if we're lucky, we're going to find their fossils someday too. But just to sort of illustrate here, other human species like the Neanderthals, like Homo heidelbergensis, and like Homo erectus was probably present in Arabia. And we have their archaeological sites. And so this is fascinating. These three sort of areas of investigation are just so interesting to me and our teams. And this is what we've been working on consistently for 10 years, and we hope for many years in the future. And when we look at Arabia and we raise this concept of green Arabia, when it was wet, when there was a lot of rainfall, what happens to the landscapes? Well, they turn green in the sense that the ecosystems consist of savannas and grasslands. And hunter-gatherers like those kinds of environments. We're talking about, when we're talking about the early periods, we're talking about people that were literally living off the land by hunting and gathering wild foodstuffs. But importantly, when there was a lot of rain in these green Arabia intervals that happen repeatedly in Arabia, you had the formation of rivers and you had the formation of lakes. And the people working on our project, the geographers, have looked at the lakes of Arabia, for example. And we now have counted 10,000 ancient lakes in Arabia. And on 70% of those lakes, and we've only been to about 200 or 300 of them, we have some form of archaeology or fossils. So this is an extraordinary record that's going to be giving us tons of new information in the future. And so when people were crossing Arabia in the green intervals, they were crossing a bountiful environment, full of animals to hunt. They had plentiful water, fresh water resources in the form of rivers, waterfalls, and lakes, and plenty of wild grasses and other seeds that potentially could be eaten as well. And so this concept of green Arabia is at the heart of our research. And you will see, I will highlight through time all these intervals and the kind of archaeology and evidence that we have. Now, our project is quite unusual. 10 years ago, we proposed that we didn't want one site. And at first, our Saudi colleagues were a bit surprised by that. But we sold the idea, and our Saudi friends and colleagues permitted us to do this work. And we've worked in something like 8 different areas in Saudi Arabia now. So we've covered, in a sense, the geography of Saudi Arabia, north to south, east to west. And this has been so enlightening because we can look at different ecosystems through time in each of these areas. And believe it or not, the archaeology is different in each area. So we're getting an excellent sample, if you will, of the different ecosystems across Saudi Arabia and how they are different through time, because all the ecosystems are not alike. They are different. And this is something we need to know in order to understand human migrations, to understand cultural connections, to understand innovations in different societies in the past. And so it's been wonderful to work all across Saudi Arabia, and I'm going to highlight some of the findings from our work. And of course, the nuts and bolts of our work is field work. We have been out there with our Saudi colleagues and international teams, surveying and excavating many sites. And I think you'll see, I hope, that we've uncovered a lot of new evidence. And, you know, coming to Saudi Arabia has been eye-opening for me. And it's been wonderful to work there and learn about the archaeological record and the heritage there. And my Saudi colleagues and the government of Saudi Arabia has done a fantastic job of highlighting the heritage of Arabia. And for instance, of course, the Roads of Arabia exhibit is unparalleled. And I got to visit it. Prince Sultan invited me to Houston, Texas, to go and see this exhibit with him. And I was very happy to see that and see how Americans, in this case, were so excited to see the heritage of Arabia, which they knew nothing, very little about. And now, of course, we see all the attention on Alula, and rightly so, an amazing place, amazing landscape, amazing heritage. And I've been really happy to see Saudi history and heritage coming to light, not only for Saudis, but in a sense for everyone around the world. But I want to tell you a slightly different story. I want to tell you about the last 1 million years in Saudi Arabia and heritage that we've been very much uncovering and publishing on. We have something like 90 scientific articles now in some of the most prestigious journals around the world, a lot of archaeological journals, but also interdisciplinary journals and high impact journals. And this has been very important to us because it's been highlighting our research and it's been getting the word out and getting a lot more interest from colleagues as well as, and of course, the general public. But we've been working on every period of time. We've been working on the Paleolithic. We've been working on the Neolithic, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and so even up to the historic period. So what we're trying to understand is 1 million years of heritage and how climate change has affected people and early humans in the past. We bring together an interdisciplinary team. We have archaeologists, of course, but we also have geologists, we have paleontologists, we have rock art experts, we have geneticists, we have all types of scientists involved in our projects. And this is wonderful because when you bring all this science to the table, you're able to tell a new story about human evolution and our story, our heritage. And I just want to mention that our Green Arabia project has been, I think, if I can say so myself, very successful. But that's because the backbone of this project are the people, the team, Saudis, of course, but also people from all over the world. I cannot mention the long list of people that have been part of this project. There are dozens and dozens of people and scientists around the world that have been part of this project. And this is just one snapshot of one team near our Juba drilling operation that we did a couple years ago. But I want to mention my colleagues, especially Abdullah al-Sharek, who just gave the previous talk, been with us since the beginning and helped to formulate this project. But we have Abdullah al-Amari, a wonderful, great archaeologist, and the project in the field would not have happened without him. He's been with us all along the way. And of course, my other colleagues from here in Jena and others based elsewhere have also been part of the project almost from the beginning. And they've been helping us put together teams, the field projects and the publications. And I just want to highlight some of their names here because they deserve a lot of credit for everything I'm going to be showing. But let's go back in time. Let's start at the beginning in a sense. I know people oftentimes talk about the heritage of Saudi Arabia going back more than 1 million years, and I don't doubt it. But we actually don't have the good quality evidence to prove it yet. We need to figure that out still. So I would say to you, our oldest archaeological site in all of Arabia is this wonderful one called Tis Al Ghada that we've published a lot on in the Nafud Desert, in the heart of the Nafud Desert, which we have dated to about 500,000 years ago to 350,000 years ago. We think it probably goes earlier, but we need to get out there again and build more chronology and look at some earlier levels in this site. But right now, this is the oldest paleontological and archaeological site in all of Arabia. And what is so spectacular about this site is the abundance of museum quality fossils. And most extraordinary, we, together with our Saudi partners at the Saudi Geological Survey, we've been excavating this site, and there have been findings of elephants here. And this is extraordinary. If you're thinking about the Nafud Desert today, well, elephants in the middle of the Nafud. And this obviously says to you right away, the ecosystems had to have been green. They were very different. They must have been savannas or grasslands, but also elephants, of course, drink a lot of fresh water every day. So we know this was a lake. We know the elephants were drawn to a lake in the middle of the Nafud, and it was a deep water, freshwater lake. And most spectacularly, we find even ducks and fish, the fossils of these creatures, even on this site, which of course today is a very dry landscape. But in the past, 500,000 years ago, there were ducks in the middle of a lake. So if you can imagine that. But there were also many other types of mammals, like you see here, for example, the oryx and gazelle. And we have lots of their bones at this site. This is a spectacular site. It's huge, and we've probably excavated 0.001% of it. So it's a wonderful site with wonderful findings. And not only do you find these mammals, but you find the carnivores that were in pursuit of the mammals. So you find hyenas and wolves and jaguars in pursuit of these animals. But it wasn't only carnivores that were interested in all these mammals migrating into the Nafud Desert. It was also archaic humans, our early ancestors. And how do we know that? Well, we have their stone tools. And these stone tools go way back, of course, in time. And not only do we have their stone tools associated with these fossil bones, but we actually, if you can see this hopefully, the cut marks, microscopic marks on the bones where a stone tool would have been used to fillet, to ascertain, to get the meat off of the bone. And so we know these early humans, some creature like Homo erectus or Homo heidelbergensis was coming to this spot and either scavenging or hunting carcasses of animals. And this is where they were getting their protein, their meat, for their diet, for their subsistence. Okay, and now moving up in time a little bit more. This is another wonderful early site, early human site called An-Nasim. And as you can see, these sites are spectacular. They're beautiful. They're massive sand dunes. But the white bits that you see, the white bits underneath and around the sand dunes are ancient lake deposits. And when we go to these lake deposits, as I said earlier, we go do surveys. And what do we find? We find archaeology. We find the archaeology sometimes embedded in some of these lakeshore deposits. And here you see Hugh holding up one of these handheld cutting tools, which we call hand axes. This was a period of time called the Acheulean, known broadly around the world, when these large cutting tools were made. They're very distinctive, very characteristic types of stone tools, and we call them large cutting tools because, as you see here in this illustration, they would have been very effective for cutting apart carcasses in order to obtain meat for the diet, to obtain skins, perhaps for clothing or for bags or anything like that. And so these stone tools were very sharp and very efficient for filleting animals. And this site, this is unpublished. Some of the highlights that I'm going to be giving you, this is a publication that Ellie Sherry is doing and should be submitting in a few days from now. And we have dated this site to something like 300,000 years ago. This is the oldest, what we call Acheulean site in all of Arabia. Again, one of the oldest, one of the most amazing sites. And here we are in central Saudi Arabia. So now we're out of the Nafud Desert and Dawadmi. Dawadmi is an amazing place. This is a volcanic landscape. What you see here depicted are what we call dikes. These are dikes made up of a type of volcanic stone called andesite. And these dikes go on for hundreds of kilometers. And we have surveyed these dikes. And lo and behold, when we have done surveys, we have found some of the longest and widest distribution of these Acheulean sites known in Arabia, but also worldwide. This is one of the longest distributions of these early man sites, if you will, anywhere in the world. So this is amazing. So when you go to these dikes, you see this andesite, and you will see in a moment, these early humans were following the dikes, and they were using the andesite to make their large cutting tools. And these early humans, when they were migrating across the Arabian Peninsula, they were getting into the heart of Arabia, into central Saudi Arabia. How were they doing that? They were finding their raw materials along these dikes to make their stone tools, but they were also traveling along rivers and lakes, because we find their evidence along rivers and lakes. And so we can see, we can map their routes of expansion out of Africa and across Arabia. And this is really quite amazing to me. I'm still amazed by this. But when we go and excavate a site like Safaka in Dawadmi, you can see these gigantic boulders. And when you look at these gigantic boulders in the middle there, I hope you can see these scars on the boulders. These boulders were smashed. They were struck by early humans in order to obtain very sharp flakes, like this man is doing today in Indonesia. He's using a big hammerstone to strike boulders in order to get very large flakes. And what do you do with the large flakes? Well, you make these hand axes. And these people, these early humans, were finding these andesite dikes to be very useful for their stone tool needs. And here you have almost moments of time where people are making their stone tools and they're falling right in place. And so we've dated this site, another Acheulean site with these large hand axes, to 225,000 years ago. Okay, let's move up on time a little bit more. Another Green Arabia interval. Here is a small lake, which we've called Alethar. And this is a small remnant of probably a once larger lake. And you can see it's not very big, but this ends up being a spectacular site. And in this one, now we're searching for modern humans. We're in the period of time where we think modern humans, Homo sapiens, might have been around. So maybe early humans like Homo erectus and heidelbergensis are no longer around. But now we're dealing with a later time frame. And on this small lake, we had some major findings. And that is, we found the first footprints of Arabia. These are more than 300 footprints of animals on this site. And this is just examples of camels, wild camels, before domestication, of course, and elephants. And we dated this site to 125,000 years ago. And so we've got this wonderful moment in time, if you will, when elephants and camels were walking around a lake. And like I said, we have many other footprints of other types of animals. And we could get a sense of how these animals were moving around freshwater water holes like they do today in Africa or parts of Arabia. And the big news that, of course, as was mentioned, that was announced not so long ago by our Saudi colleagues, as well as press releases put out around the world. And this was just recently published, that we have the first human footprints of Arabia. And again, the site dates to about 125,000 years ago. And there are about 7 human footprints represented on this lake. But now I think if we start looking more, we're going to find more human footprints in other lakes. I think this is just the beginning. And so this is giving us some amazing moments in time when people were walking around these water holes. And you can see like a modern hunter-gatherer drinking some water along a water hole. Well, if you could imagine camels and elephants and other animals around this lake, and humans were also, hunter-gatherers were also walking around this lake doing this too. Now, they don't leave their stone tools here, most interestingly. So we think maybe their campsites are in different places, campsites of which we do find. And we find them in places like this, Al-Wusta. This is also a major site for Arabia in general. Another beautiful site. I mean, you know, these spectacular sand dune settings, but you can see these jeeps are resting on ancient lake shores. And here at Al-Wusta, we have evidence again, what we think are modern humans, Homo sapiens. And this site is very important because this is the very first human fossil found in Arabia. It's just a finger bone, it's the middle finger bone of a hand, but it's the first. And I hope the first of many. But we need to get out there and do more surveys and excavations. And this was very big news when it was published in one of the Nature journals. And in fact, I think the Nature editors told me more than 2,000 news stories from around the world covered this small, tiny little human finger bone. So a very significant find because we have Homo sapiens in Arabia at a very early period of time. And by the way, earlier than what geneticists had previously believed that Homo sapiens was on the peninsula. So this is important new information of where Homo sapiens might have been. And not only is the finger bone so exciting and having a finger bone of a modern human, but also the kind of environment they were living in. Again, this is a lake shore. And on this lake shore, we find the bones of many animals. But I think most extraordinary for me is finding hippo bones, hippo teeth. And so, you know, imagine hippos living in the Nafud desert. And so again, they would have had to have freshwater, deep, permanent lakes to be living on. And this is why people were drawn to these places. And another significant finding of Al-Wusta was that for the very first time, we had direct evidence of a human fossil with what we call Middle Paleolithic technology. And this is very important because we find these technologies all across Saudi Arabia. And I think it must mean that some of those sites must represent Homo sapiens being in Saudi Arabia. But again, we need to have the fossils in order to prove that. And I think with future field work, we'll find more. So Al-Wusta is providing all sorts of new information for us. Excuse me. But then another big question, I've told you about the green intervals, when things are good, when environments are lush, when there's a lot of rainfall and there's lakes everywhere. But then the big question is, what happens when green Arabia turns dry? What happens when landscapes become hyper-arid and arid? Well, we think that humans and animals contract into certain favorable zones, but there aren't many of those. But we also think there might have been some regional abandonments and maybe even extinctions. And this is something we need to learn a lot more about. So we have expansions of humans, but we may also have extinction of humans during very dry intervals. And in the last few slides now, I want to go over moving up in time very dramatically in the last 10,000 years. I just want to give you some highlights and snapshots of what we've been doing. We've been working in the Juba Paleolake Basin for many years now, doing a lot of rock art studies. But in relation to those rock art studies, we've also been doing archaeology. And that's critical because we can situate the archaeology with the rock art. And the Juba is a very, very special place. It was a very large lake. It was more than 20 kilometers in length at its height. So this is a big one. And this was a permanent freshwater lake, no doubt, based on our scientific studies. And I'll tell you the kind of evidence that we're uncovering there. And if you're interested in the big transition, I call it here, from a hunting and gathering lifestyle to a more settled lifestyle, if you will, or a semi-sedentary lifestyle, which we think was pastoralism, the adoption of cows and sheep and goats for a new lifestyle, well, I think we're onto it. I think we're finding some very important new information in the Juba Basin. And the rock art documents this. We think we can see the transition from a hunting and gathering life to one in which incorporates domesticates, animals like domesticated cattle. But more than that, we are finding archaeological sites that now have their bones, have the bones of these animals, the cow bones, as well as the bones of what we think are sheep and goat. And we've dated some of these back to 7,000 years ago. And we want to find older ones still, more field work needed, but we're finding older archaeological sites which have strong connections to the Levant, where a lot of these domestication processes happened. So we think there's very close connection between Arabian peoples and Levantine peoples. And we think there's a transfer of culture, but also domesticates. So people were very much connected like they were in the deep past, even during periods like the Neolithic. And now we have a new type of lifestyle where pastoralism comes in, where the care of animals comes in, and a completely transformed life from being a hunter-gatherer. And I could do a whole lecture on this, and so could some of our team members, but we are finding whole landscapes in the Juba Basin, but also in the Nafud Desert of spectacular sites. This is now a constructed landscape. Amazing structures are being built all over Western Saudi Arabia, Northern Saudi Arabia, and into the Juba Basin. We have hundreds and hundreds of burial cairns. And we see structures like these amazing mustatils all over in Juba, as well as parts of the Nafud Desert and over to Western Saudi Arabia. And this is a completely new phenomenon. We can almost think of it as a monumental landscape or a sacred landscape. People are doing some amazing things here on a monumental scale. And we think these are rituals in the past, probably connected in some ways to new lifestyles with domesticates, but also pressures being put on them by ecosystem changes. And this is what we want to know a lot more about. And bear with me, the last couple slides now. But these people are living in the Juba Basin around the lake during time periods where there are major droughts in Arabia, at least in southern Arabia. In fact, this is called the Dark Millennium, between 5,900 years ago to 5,300 years ago in Southeast Arabia. And there were big transformations going on in the Gulf region and in places like Oman in terms of human societies. Well, what's so interesting about Juba is that people didn't disappear from here. We actually have evidence that they kept living in the desert around the Juba Basin And that's probably because wetlands were still available to them, and they had domesticated animals with them, so they could survive long droughts. And so in the Dark Millennium, people didn't disappear. In fact, they innovated. They had ingenious solutions to dealing with climate change. And this is just an example of that from the past. And finally, I come to my last slide or two, but I'm really grateful to Saudi Aramco. A few years ago, Prince Sultan brought them to the table, and they drilled for us some cores into the Juba Paleo Lake. And we have about 80 meters of cores, which we've now dated to the last 1 million years. And this is going to tell us so much about climate change in the past, changes between wet and dry cycles through time, and what effect did that have on human societies. These cores are being studied by large numbers of scientists. This is all unpublished right now, but we expect major publications to be coming out of this, and absolutely new information about the environments of Saudi Arabia through time. And finally, I just want to say that this isn't all just about, research and keeping scientists happy. This is about uncovering heritage. And we're very excited to do public outreach activities, educate people all around the world and across Saudi Arabia, but also talk to the media about the heritage of Arabia, which is, I would say, mostly unknown to many people. But also, it's not only about heritage, it's about us today. It's about us living in the modern world and the changes that are going on in societies and the effect of climate on us today and in the future. And the media is a very important tool, if you will, to reach people all around the world, to educate, to think about the past and where we are going as people. And so we are grateful to our Saudi colleagues for allowing us to talk to the media over the years. And we think the story is really getting out a lot. And for every major publication we have, we work with the Saudi government, of course, to put out media releases and to try to tell interesting stories about the past and about the contemporary world. Thank you.
Mike, thank you very much. What an excellent paper, and what exciting work. I mean, a really wise choice. I can see your thinking, and you've focused in on the Arabian Peninsula, and you're really making it talk to us in a global way. It's fantastic work. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to both of the speakers and to Dr. Jasir. What we have now is about just under 20 minutes left, about quarter of an hour actually. As I've already sent a message out, if you've got questions, I know that many of you have, then I'm going to have to ask you to type those questions into the Q&A box at the bottom. And I'll do my very best acting as a sort of a question DJ to read those questions out to our speakers. And I'll start that process now. So the first question is from Dr. Saad Al-Arifi. And he says, okay, sir, he says, have there been any new archaeological discoveries in the center of Riyadh? And has any archaeological work been conducted in Diriyah? I can answer some of that myself, actually. I don't think any work has been done in the center of Riyadh, though we know that Mikhal and Mukrin are supposed to have been very important early Islamic sites there. But I can maybe hand over to Dr. Jasir about Diriyah and about maybe future work in Riyadh. Dr. Jasir, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, actually, future work is now growing in a very interesting speed, and we're already at the end of building our strategy, the new Heritage Commission strategy that has major components serving archaeology work, and most likely we will have a dedicated center or specialized center for research, and it will be enhanced, and it will be done with local and international universities and research centers. And also we will establish new special purpose centers like the underwater, the Heritage Center, and of course the World Heritage Unit. We are in the process of also building the action plan, where we will announce the different, hopefully in 2021, after the COVID crisis is inshallah over, the different missions on different sites. And we will ask this time, this agreement with Dr. Abdullah Zahrani and the team, we will ask through proper channels for proposals to international research center and archaeology centers to participate. And of course, we will give the priority to missions that have worked in the past and they have the usual scientific and field background that we needed in Saudi Arabia, of course, with the emphasis of the diversity. We are happy to have missions in the past from Far East, from Japan, from China, moving to most European states, and of course the US, and we are expanding now to more countries. We see this field as a growing field, and we think the Green Arabia project is still maybe with this amazing discoveries, we still have a lot to survey and to discover and to announce and to conclude. What is really interesting now in the sector in Saudi Arabia, it is not anymore what we call the elite sector. It is not only the academics who are interested in the sector. We have now this kind of boom on the community, on the leadership, on decision makers, and on the private sector engagement, where people start to ask, how can we be part of this successful rediscovering of this amazing piece of land that is really the center of the world in terms of civilization. And as Michael described it, it's like the bridge between the three continents. Thank you very much.
Dr. Jasser, thank you very much for that answer. The question now from Abdullah Al-Zahrani and Messer Al-Katani. They're asking about the Red Sea, joining the Red Sea project. Will the Red Sea project continue, Abdullah? And is there any way of trying to join it, the results with the Green Arabia project, to create a broader synthesis? Maybe Mike could also come in on that.
Yes, absolutely. The Red Sea project has been developing and continuing geographically, and also doing more work has been done up in the north along the Red Sea coast. But due to the pandemic and so on, things have been slow, but we're hoping to do some more work in the near future.
I would just like to say that in a sense, we've already been working with the Red Sea project because we have joint publications. So we have, in a sense, compared some of our results. So we have very strong connections, of course, with the people in both projects. But I would also say that Professor Jeff Bailey and Abdullah and all that team have done a fantastic job of surveying the coast, but there's a lot more to do. I think that you can, you know, the coast is huge. And I think that all the coastlines could be surveyed. And I think you will find the earliest sites on the coast. As Abdullah said, there's one at least 400,000 years old, possibly, and I'm sure there are many more. But you have to not only be looking underwater, you have to be looking on the coast itself, but also near coast. So this is a big project. But I would just say that there's a huge potential in that. But yes, we've written articles on the coast versus the inland. So very much our projects have stimulated each other too, in terms of what are the roots of human expansions? What are the migration pathways? And these are things we're really thinking about because we have projects on the coast and in the interior. But sure, of course, we could always do more. There's always more to team up on. I would also say the dream of putting a consortium of researchers together also is there. So if Dr. Jasser, I mean, I'm happy to share some more ideas about that. But, you know, we have a lot of great researchers working in Arabia. And I think, you know, if we could put our minds together more occasionally, and not just workshops, but actually thinking about the archaeological record and what we can all tell from that archaeological record, I think it would be really great to try to stimulate cross-project interactions.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. I'm trying to move quickly now through. We got 28. I don't think we're going to get through them all. A question here from Gopesh Jha to Professor Mike. There are multiple sites in Green Arabia on the Green. Can you see this question, Mike?
Yes.
From the Green Arabia project, which are very close in terms of temporal status, especially ones from the marine isotope stage 5, which yield middle Paleolithic technocomplex. He's asking, do you see any behavioral variability amongst inhabitants of these sites, which might show diverse strategies? Can you comment on that?
Yes, certainly. I mean, so the Middle Paleolithic is just, you know, what we use as conveniently as a period of time, but we do see a lot of variability in the sites. And of course, we see variability in the stone tool technology. So this probably has to do with different raw materials available to people in the past, but also has to do with different adaptations to different ecosystems. But it's also possible, of course, that it's just not Homo sapiens making these technologies. It could be other species of humans that would have been around at this time. And that is information we are definitely interested in and we're onto as a research topic.
I'm going to drop Hookie Walker's question for a moment. Sorry about that, Hookie. I'm going to try and focus on the more scientific things. Mahmoud Abbas here to Mike and others. The Dark Millennia. Well, Abdullah maybe has got something to say on this as well. How do we explain this? Do you think it exists? Some people are challenging the idea now. And how about the last glacial maximum? Was it dry? So do you think the people of Arabia have migrated back to the Levant? Maybe, Mike, you could comment a little bit on Jeff Rose's idea of a refugia in the Gulf region. I don't know. What do you have to say for that question, both of you?
This is a big topic.
It is.
A lecture in itself. But I would say there are people in the audience, just for your information, that are some authors of some of this kind of work. So they know better than I do. But I was very interested in this topic because, as I was saying, in southern Arabia, there's been an argument that there was huge societal transformation because of a long drought. And there's information to suggest that is the case. Now, it's not absolutely confirmed, but there was an interesting hypothesis developed. What I wanted to do, what our team wanted to do, was to test this very interesting idea. And we did. We looked in the Nafud Desert, very far away from southeastern Arabia, and it would have been experiencing very different rainfall regimes. So from different monsoons, different, rainfall patterns, and our very first evidence from the Nafud suggests that people were able to survive in places where they were not able to survive in southern Arabia. And we think that may have to do with the different ecosystems there, and also possibly some ingenious cultural solutions to dealing with aridity. So this is a topic, this is a brand new topic in a sense. I mean, we just published our first paper on this. I mean, this has been going on in southern Arabia for a while, but we just published our first paper on this. And we have lots of research yet to do on this topic in terms of environments, droughts, and what was the responses of human communities to droughts and wet cycles and so forth.
Thank you. Abdullah, do you have any comment there?
Yes, I think I will just say something complementary to what Mike says. And I would say probably if one looks at also the ethnographic evidence relating to the changes of climate and the dryness of the weather and all of that. And this has been experienced in recent memory of the people of Central Arabia, which is hard hit by the drought and the absence of rain for many, many decades, and how they have managed to survive all of these pressures, and how some of them may have moved around or moved away, but still, we still got a lot of evidence that are worth looking at from the ethnographic viewpoint to complement any research that may go into it. As we know, the archaeological record is not perfect, and you never find all the sites and all the evidence from the past. What we find is probably a certain percentage that may reflect what was happening, but it's not everything. So I'm saying is that probably some study of ethnographic evidence into such situations, which Central Arabia historical records have shown that people have try to survive and stick to their land as much as possible, or probably move around, but not abandon completely. So this is one thing I just thought is worth saying.
Thank you, Abdullah. Thank you for that. I'm going to move on now to the question by Kada Smail, which is to Mike, but I think again we can all comment. The so-called mustatil phenomenon also exists in Southern America. That's really stretching an interesting comparison. What leads you to believe that they serve ritual purposes?
Well, you know, Hugh Grucut just wrote an article about this as monumental landscapes.
Right.
And so that's very interesting. But also our other colleagues, our Australian colleagues, our French colleagues have been working on these kinds of phenomena, you know, desert kites and other types of structures. We know, I mean, I guess we've learned a lot about them from the air, from satellite imagery. And we know there's thousands of these kinds of structures out there, but we actually know very little about their archaeology. And we've done, you know, and so some of the teams are actually starting to explore them from an excavation and documentation perspective, but we have a lot to learn yet, a lot. And you could work on these kinds of structures for many, many years. And I think that there'll be major discoveries as we work on them in the field. So we need to work on them more, but these are phenomena that are quite amazing. They're dramatic almost. People put a lot of labor, a lot of time into them. And they might not have, in some cases, they might have been for subsistence needs, like, you know, trapping animals. But in some cases, they're associated with burials, for example. And these are monumental landscapes, probably from a burial perspective as well. So I think there is some sort of religious or ritual connection. And that's an untold story. And there have been, I think recently, our French colleagues have suggested that these are sacred landscapes as well. They've just published a recent article on that. But again, we need to know so much more about them because they have been called mysterious from the air. But we could take the mystery out of it by doing the archaeology, and that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Derek, just a very quick one. Yeah, just it's also good to emphasize that for the stone structures, the giant stone structures that just mentioned by Professor Michael, and the rock art that is amazingly distributed in Saudi Arabia, that we are launching 2 separate projects to survey them all and to document and to do more interpretation for these 2 important parts of Saudi archaeology, because they are the parts who are, at least as far as I know, I'm not an archaeologist, it is the part that is above the surface of the land, not something that needs some digging. So we are launching with Dr. Abdullah and the team and maybe King Saud University these 2 mega projects, one for the rock arts and the other one for the stone structures, and hopefully we will benefit from the amazing international partners, inshallah.
Shukra. Thank you, Dr. Jasser. Thank you very much. I'm afraid we are now at the finish, and we have 36 questions outstanding, and these are some really good questions here. It breaks my heart, really. And I'm sure the speakers would love to have more time, but I'm told by headquarters that we have to end the session now. It's been exceptional. We've had some fantastic talks. We've learned some really interesting stuff, and we've seen real excitement and hope for Saudi archaeology and what's to come in the next few years. 224 people attended this session, which is a really good number for an archaeological lecture anywhere in the world. And as I said, there are 36 good questions still there waiting to be answered. All I think this tells us is we need to organize more sessions like this. There's a lot of interest and there's a lot of really good information out there. I'd like to say a big thank you to all of our speakers. I'd like to say a big thank you to the King Faisal Center for helping us to organize this. And most of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to all of the 224 people that attended and for the fantastic questions that they put up. Thank you very much to everybody. And I very much hope that we can join another session like this in the very near future. Goodbye to everybody.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abdullah.
شكرا مع السلامة.
Assalam.